Howdy everyone, John with Channel Zoic here, and after taking a bit of a sabbatical so I can get our business up and running and start doing breeding with different types of exotics, I'm finally getting to part 2 of our video series going over some of the pros and cons and different things to know whenever you're living at a specific place and thinking about getting an exotic animal. Part 1 went over the general gist of everything I'm going to talk about and looking at apartments as a whole. If you guys haven't watched that, please check it out. I think it turned out pretty good, and it should be pretty useful for getting a baseline of what you may need. But if you haven't happened to see that video, and you're just kind of wondering what this is going to be about, we're basically going to be talking about 3 separate types of living arrangements that are pretty common for most people to deal with, whether that's living in an apartment, whether you're living in a single family home, or you happen to be living on a farm. Reason I'm talking about this is it's a thing that I have lived in all 3 of these places, and I happen to have kept animals at all 3 of them as well. So I kind of have a bit of an idea of some of the things you may be able to do or not do depending on where you're living. This video is going to be going over single family households. Depending on what you have, I'm going to basically set it up as you have a normal sized house and you happen to have a backyard. That's kind of the general gist of what I'm going to be talking about, and you're going to have neighbors. For the outline of this video, we're going to be looking at the pros and cons of the living arrangement that you're in, along with some exotics that I would recommend you looking at as something that you could get into, along with some that I would actually kind of recommend against. At the end, I'm going to give you some tips or tricks to hopefully make it a little bit easier when deciding what animals you should go with and how to take care of them. So starting off, let's see some pros. Right off the bat, it's space. Space is way more plentiful whenever you happen to have a house than an apartment, for obvious reasons. I don't feel like I have to point out the difference in that, but you really have to think about you're going to be able to get better setups for rack systems. You're going to be able to fit larger enclosures. You're not going to have to worry about figuring out if you're going to dominate an entire room with 1 to 2 enclosures. I know whenever I was in my apartment, I could have maybe 2 animals in my room without having to affect my other roommates. But whenever I was living in a house, I could have the entire downstairs to myself whenever it came to having a rack system for my critters. And that made it way easier to experiment with some different species and try things out. It really helps a lot whenever you know that you can dedicate an entire room to having animals, or you can spread them out depending on what you're planning. Speaking of spreading them out is the fact that you can have multiple rooms for different types of species. Now, if you're not jumping full swing into this, it may not be something that is as needed, but as you maybe expand your collection and you try to have different types of animals, multiple rooms is really useful. We happen to have some of our hotter, drier climate animals in one space. And then whenever it comes to our crested geckos and gargs and mourning geckos, we like to have them in their own little space that we can keep a little bit cooler and a little bit on the more humid side. Obviously, their enclosures will still need to be able to match what they need, but it just makes hitting those things a little bit easier. I don't have to worry as much that the bearded dragon enclosure is going to overheat the crested geckos that are right next to them because they can be in a different room. Along with dealing with space, a big one is you can actually use an outdoor area. If you happen to have a picketed fence, maybe you have a larger animal like a tortoise, or you just want to be able to take your bearded dragon outside and let him run around, do his thing. I know for a fact our tortoise and our tegu like to go outside as long as we keep an eye on them. And it makes a world of difference of knowing that it's your area, that you don't have to worry about somebody else's dog or anything else happen to come in and affecting your animals. And the last main one is the control over environment. That usually depends on the kind of house that you're in. But if you're buying a house, you usually can check that stuff first, or you at least have a general idea of how everything heats up throughout the year. But you'll have an AC that hopefully is built into the entire house. A lot of modern houses have HVAC systems, so you can cool it whenever you need to, and you can keep it warmer whenever you don't. And maybe you need a specific area to stay cooler or stay warmer comparatively. You'll have a lot more control over that whenever you're in a house than if you were in a 1 to 2 bedroom apartment. You have way less control over that situation. especially if, let's say, that there happens to be a lot of windows in a room. You'll have the ability to tint them, control how much light is getting in, if you need more light. There's just so many ways that you can kind of control the environment that your animals are around to make it where you're not as affected in the long run whenever it comes to heating or lighting or anything in that realm. So, in general, the flexibility that you get with a house just is so much better than an apartment. It's one of those things that the apartment's a great place to start off and start building that out, kind of like whenever it comes to having your place on your own. You have a lot more independence, but you also have a lot more responsibility. And that leads into us looking at some of the cons because you are going to have a lot more responsibilities whenever it comes to making sure everything is what you need for your animal. The first big thing to figure out is how old your house is and how up to date is everything inside of it, whether it's the appliances, the HVAC system, any of that stuff. It's a good idea to figure out where you're sitting at and what needs to be updated. Because especially whenever it comes to older houses, rooms can get too hot and too cold. There may be kind of poor insulation in certain areas, and you may run into just smaller problems that you didn't think of whenever you first planned on getting a reptile. Another big one of those is a fire hazard. Whether it's a device like a heat lamp that's going to be outputting it from above, or you may have some pads that heat from below, that is going to be something that is a fire hazard. And it's always going to be a fire hazard, but being able to figure out how much in your specific area is key. Do you have carpet? Is there good insulation for the actual wires? How much draw is it taking? How good is the wiring in the house? All of these things are something to think about, along with what do you have it on? What kind of enclosure do you have? If you have something that maybe can catch fire easier, that may be a worry. It's just one of those things that you're going to have fire hazard no matter what. But whenever it comes to a house, there's just going to be a higher chance of things happening. And whenever it comes to cons, it's not just about the house itself. It's also about regulations and restrictions you might have where you're living. Now, we did talk about this a little bit in the last video. There's always going to be regulations, whether you have local, state, or federal laws that you have to follow. That's something that you should always check in the first place. But then you also have to worry about your local HOA. Some people don't have to worry about an HOA, but double check and make sure that you don't have one. Or if you do, you're going to be fitting in with whatever rules they may have. There's tons of HOA rules that vary depending on where you're at. Naming them would be kind of hard, but things that happen to be outside your house are usually going to be a big one. So if you have a backyard area for your animals, you may want to make sure that there's nothing against that. Along with that, it's always going to be a thing whenever you have larger animals like tortoises, monitor lizards, large snakes. It may be a thing that people make a stink about that. They can be scared of it, even if it isn't a dangerous animal. It's just going to happen. So it's always good to kind of reiterate with whoever is running the HOA, whether it's justified or not, whatever rules they put in place, just to make sure that you aren't putting this time and effort into getting an animal and then finding out that you're going to have to deal with a ton more extra effort to make sure you can keep it. The last con I'm going to be talking about are DIY challenges. Now, you can obviously have somebody come in and hire an actual contractor to build something out, but if you're wanting to go above and beyond, it's going to be pretty expensive. Being able to do that doesn't mean that you may have the funds to be able to make an entire large rack. I know whenever it comes to even just having shelving units, I have to plan ahead, make sure that there's space, figure out where the wiring's going to go, all of that stuff. And I'm pretty handy overall, but it is a task, and you need to think about that. If you're going to hire somebody, it's going to be very expensive. And if you're going to do it yourself, you're going to have to do a good amount of research on what materials you're going to be using. Even just a general shelf with some enclosures on it usually isn't going to be that bad. But you're going to find out that as you add a enclosure and then you want some more, you may want to have something that's a little bit more built out. And it's going to take extra time and space to do that, especially if you're trying to move enclosures over. I know one of the big problems we're having right now is with our leopard geckos. We're trying to figure out how to move them all onto a wiring system while moving them into new enclosures. So you have to have extra enclosures on hand to move them out of the old ones. And then what are you going to do with the old ones? These kind of questions are things you have to think about. It's very easy to get into a project. I do this all the time, where I get into a project and then I figure out this may be a little bit more than I can actually take on at the moment. It's a bigger chunk than I can chew. But it's about thinking about that and planning ahead that kind of makes it rewarding once you do figure it out. Now, some recommended exotics I'm going to throw at you. All of the animals that we recommended in the first video can also be counted here. There's none of them that will have a problem moving from an apartment to a house. It's just one of those things that we're not going to go over the exact same things. But right off the bat, something that I usually would tell people to lean against whenever it comes to having an apartment, I think that if you have medium to large lizards, a house is where you can start trying that. That is the best time to start getting into your bearded dragons, your blue-tongued skinks, your tegus, and all that kind of stuff. And you can get away with having a blue-tongued skink in an apartment. I know I did. But there's going to be a lot more you have to work around, and you're going to have a lot more problems. But if you have a house, it's pretty easy. You have a lot more control, like I brought up. And I think that even getting a tegu is more doable, especially if you can have an outdoor area where they can have during the summer and enjoy themselves and get some extra vitamin D from the actual sun. That's going to be big. Along with that, you can look at larger enclosure-sized animals. Usually this is going to be something that can stay outside, like a tortoise, for most of the year. Obviously, if you don't live in an area where the temperature will hit where they can live outside, you may have to have an indoor area. But especially for tortoises, I always recommend, unless you have a house, don't get a tortoise. It's very easy to run out of space for them and then feel like you're not giving them the best quality life that you can. But if you have an outdoor area and a little backyard that you've specifically set up for tortoises, perfect. That's great. And they will actually be a very interesting thing to bring people over and show, because tortoises are usually one of the main animals that nobody is going to be scared of. Or at least I haven't met anybody that's scared of a tortoise yet. If I run into somebody like that, maybe I'll change my mind. But almost every single person that I've ever shown our tortoise Camouche, they love him. Another recommendation is if you do like larger snakes, this is going to be the time that you can start dipping your toes into that. This is going to be the time to start trying that. Your reticulated pythons, any of your larger boas, that kind of stuff, this is going to be the time that you can start looking into those and thinking about how you're going to take care of them. Moving away from just larger animals, this is going to be a great time if you're wanting to test the waters with some of the more temperamental animals, whether that's red-eyed crocodile skinks to any kind of amphibian. You don't have to worry as much because you can have even just a little area off to the side of all their needed things. You can make sure everything is closed off and kind of climate controlled to where they're not going to have any variation, which is super nice. And you can just start playing around with more temperamental species. Along with that, you don't have to worry about if they spray or do any kind of pest control in the apartments. You have a lot more control over what you bring into the house. Because their skin is thinner, you don't want anything to accidentally get them sick or kill them. Along with temperamental species, this is going to be another time that you can start dipping your toes into the more complex bioactive enclosures or vivariums, that kind of stuff. I think having bigger vivariums with multiple different types of species is awesome, but it does take time. It takes a lot of research. and it takes a lot of space. Not just the enclosure itself, but all of the stuff around the enclosure. Are you going to need a shelf to have it on? Are you going to need a full table? Or are you going to need a smaller closet to be able to keep any of the needed equipment in it? I know that it's one thing that we have a bioactive for our dart frogs. And unfortunately, just because it grows so well with a lot of the different plants we have in there, my wife has to keep doing cuttings of the different plants that are in there, and we have a ton of extra plants. So that's another thing. Are you going to have space for extra plants and cuttings if you have to trim down your enclosure? So when it comes to houses, it's definitely going to be an open opportunity to what you can try out. I'm just going to quickly talk about some things I would lean against. The big one starting off with is any kind of venomous or dangerous animals. I know, this is kind of a loaded term. Hog noses are venomous if they bite you for a certain amount of time and chew on you. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your vipers. I'm talking about your larger monitor lizards that can take a bite out of you and send you to the emergency room. I'm talking about your massive snakes that if they get wrapped around you, they may kill you. Obviously, if you're thinking about any of those, you should be an experienced caretaker of animals and not just jumping into it as your second or third animal. Along with that, you have to think about what is scary animals. I will 100% always be an advocate for if you know you can take care of the animal well and you have a rational basis for it, go ahead, get whatever you want. You need to be able to look at yourself and introspectively figure out what is that line that you can or can't cross. But unfortunately, whenever it comes to where you're living, if you have a lot of neighbors, you don't want to be the one person to put up a stink. I don't think I want to be the guy advocating for starting a problem with your local HOA just because you want to keep a certain animal. I'm not saying don't, but you need to figure out what kind of threshold everybody around you has for this kind of stuff, because you probably will unfortunately get targeted in the same way that there's other types of animals like pit bulls, like other types of exotics may deal with. It's just something that you need to be able to read the room and know that you're not going to cause you or your family any kind of heartache. Now I'm going to do some rapid fire tips for exotic owners that I think I may turn into a full video. If you guys like that idea, please leave a comment below and I can think about putting that together, or at the very least making some short form content for it, because there's a lot of different things that I've noticed that have increased my ability to take care of my animals without having to wear myself out. Right off the bat, figure out what extra equipment you need for food, lighting, and water. This has been a game changer, is thinking about how I'm going to store their food, how am I going to store the water that they use, because yeah, you can go over and fill up water bowls from the faucet, but if you have a little $5 to $15 thing from Amazon that sucks out of one of those big old water fountain things, that is amazing. I use it on a daily basis. Those are the greatest thing whenever it comes to giving animals water, because it's right there. I have my own little area that I make up our food at. I can make their water up and then I can just bring it over to them. Along with that, I would definitely look at automating everything you can. Obviously, not every single thing you can do is automated, but we live in a time where a lot of things have attachment to Wi-Fi or they can be set on timers. We have all of our misters on a set timer schedule for different types of animals. And it's great because I can know that it's getting sprayed. I only have to fill the bucket up with water every once in a while whenever it starts to run low. And it makes it way easier that I don't have to track all of that in the same way that I have to track their food or anything like that. And not just their food, get their heat on an automated system. That's a big one. I like to get certain thermometers that I can hook up to an app and then track how hot it gets, especially whenever it starts to get into the fall to winter season, to see how much I need to crank up. Maybe I need to switch bulbs, because that's a big one. Being able to switch out bulbs if it's hotter or colder. You never know how crazy the temperature is going to get, so you want to be able to modify your living arrangement as you go. And the last one I'll bring up is find out where your local veterinary is and if they do exotics. We have 2 exotics close to our house, and when I say close, I mean within 2 hours of our house. That's a far drive, but you obviously want to do that if you care about your animal. We actually had one of our breeding crested geckos have to get his hemipene amputated because of an accident during breeding. And we didn't know what we were going to do. We were really scared that we wouldn't be able to get him in on time and there would be some kind of necrosis kicking up. But luckily, there was a vet clinic that was close enough that took on exotics that worked with us. We got up there and we got it all set up to where we didn't have to worry as much. They were very helpful, and there's luckily one other one. They weren't able to get us in till 3 days later just because they're as busy as they are. So that's the thing. Find out where the vet clinics are close to you and if they actually do take exotics. So knowing where to go and what you need to do is paramount when it comes to taking care of your animals. But I think that'll about do it for this video. I'm going to be moving to the farm video here soon. I've got a couple other ideas planned ahead for maybe making it a little bit easier of some Amazon ratings and some different equipment ratings that I would give. But if you guys have any other questions, leave a comment below. I'd be happy to help out and figure out where you guys need to look next for your guys' exotics. And I may be able to point you to some other channels, but either way, if you can give a like or subscribe as well, that would be great. We're trying to build the community so we can start moving towards making more content, and hope to see you in the next video.